Good afternoon and welcome to the Minneapolis Foundation's webinar this afternoon. We have about a third of the respondents who are intending to participate logged in, so there might be quite a bit of folks coming in as we do the introductory type of remarks. My name is Luz Maria Frias. I serve as the Vice President of Community Impact for the Minneapolis Foundation. For today, we'll have a brief agenda that we will then look at the community impact approach and the guidelines that we have. We will go over our focus areas and our key drivers and key results regarding our grant guidelines.
The conference has been muted.
We will review the application process, and then we'll also take questions that you may submit then using the chat function. We have with us, as part of the webinar, our Community Impact team, which includes the Directors of Community Impact, Directors of Strategy in Community Impact, as well as Andrea Porter and Deanna Korn are my assistants. In terms of logistics, we will have you stay on the line. If for any reason you lose connection, the information on the screen will guide you to the correct phone number to call again and the access code. During the participation this afternoon, we ask that you mute your phone line so that we can avoid any disruption to others. And if you'd like to ask a question or submit a comment, please use the chat function on the lower left side of your screen. The webinar will be available on our website after August 4th at minneapolisfoundation.org. So we'll begin with our overview now of our grant-making guidelines. We have a number of documents that guide our decision-making at the Minneapolis Foundation. The strategic plan, which was approved for the time period 2009 through 2015 initially, but has been extended by the Board of Directors through 2020. The other document is the One Minneapolis report that many of you may be familiar with, that looks at the indicators in our community of where the disparities are most prevalent, and they have then the information about the needs in our community and where they most exist. And then our grant guidelines. The grant guidelines then were revised a year ago and have been edited and updated for this year as well. As the questions are coming in chat, we are looking at them in real time, and we'll have some opportunity towards the end of the presentation to then answer those for you so that we can keep the flow of the webinar. In terms of their approach to community impact as far as the actual funds, we get quite a bit of questions about how the funds exist and what portion of the foundation's funds are available for the distribution in our community. And I'll start by just highlighting for you then that the majority of the funds held by the foundation are those that are designated as donor-advised funds. And that are across various areas. The 5 areas that you see in front of us here with arts and culture, education, economic vitality, civic engagement, and health and environment. And it's a small piece, which is in the blue, which is the actual amount of funds and grant allocations that we do distribute through the grant-making process and the grant cycle that we'll be addressing this afternoon. When we look at the actual application that we're discussing this afternoon, I'd like you to focus your attention on education, economic vitality, and civic engagement. Those are 3 key focus areas. The other areas, arts and culture, environment, and health are not the focus areas that we have in our grant-making distribution. So if you are particularly interested in arts and culture, health, or environment, then this webinar won't suit your purposes this afternoon because this webinar does not cover that. If you'd like to disengage, we certainly understand that. For the rest of you, we want you to understand that the focus areas that we have, that our involvement in those areas extend beyond grant making. They include 8 other strategies, and you can see that they appear on the screen there with advocacy, co-investment with other foundations or donors, collaboration, convening, program-related investments, public awareness, relationships, and research. Just to give you an indicator that when we had restructured our grant making in the community in our department, that we also restructured the role of our what was once program officers to be directors of impact strategies, so they can really focus on all 9 strategies, and grant making being only one of those strategies.
2 of the questions are on maybe time sensitive for folks that are asking about health and environment and the Robbins Kaplan Learn to Receive Foundation. We may take a second to cover those questions in case they want to get off the call.
So we're getting questions now. One of the last questions here is the application process for donor advice funds different than for community endowment? Our organization addresses health and environment, so how would I go about applying for this focus or grant? There isn't an application grant process for the donor advice funds. It's solely discretionary at their decision-making authority. We don't have authority or guidance over that. So there isn't one. It's a matter of having a direct relationship with those donors or exposing those donors to your work. Because of the number of donors that we do have, which is over 1,100, they do like us to respect their privacy and anonymity. So we're not in a position either to share the identity of those donors. It's more of a development type of activity that a nonprofit would need to engage in to enlist the support of those private donor advice funds. I hope that answers your question. When we look at the community impact grant making, really have in mind the vision that we have here at Minneapolis Foundation, which is that Minneapolis is vibrant, inclusive, and positioned to thrive locally and compete globally. And a key word there is inclusive. We have a framework that is built on equity, racial equity, social equity, and economic equity, and ensuring then that all members of our society then have the ability to take a look at the work that we are doing. And when we look at the 3 focus areas then, we really need to focus on the 3 key areas that are in front of you. Again, education, economic vitality, and civic engagement. You'll see the areas that we have there in more explicit detail, but you'll also hear from each one of our directors of impact strategy regarding the key areas that they're really focused on, key drivers and strategies and that they are focusing on. When you go through our LOI and our application, we'll be focused on the goals that are then attached to each of the focus areas, as well as the key drivers and the key results. And this is simply then a glossary for you to have an understanding, a shared understanding of what those goals, key drivers, and key results are meant to cover in the application process. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Max Korn. Max serves as our Director of Impact Strategy over Education.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Max, and I'm going to say a few words about each of our key drivers in the education area. Before we get into that, we did see a question about the Robbins Kaplan Miller to Receive Foundation. which we provide services for and funds primarily in education. And so their LOI process, by submitting an LOI to the Minneapolis Foundation, you will automatically, without doing anything further, be eligible for a grant from the Robbins Kaplan Learners 3C Foundation for Children. Their specific funding priorities are listed on their website. They closely align with ours. They have slightly different interests within the same kind of key drivers that we look at, so there might be some slight differences there, but they fit very well into the LOIs for education that are up on our website. So it is the same process, and you will be eligible for a grant from both the Minneapolis Foundation and our KMC by submitting just the one LOI. I also wanted to point out, I know that this question may come up at the end, that on the website where you access the LOI, there are 4 separate LOIs for each key driver under education. And the reason it's like that in education is because, as I'll talk about here in a few minutes, the way that we measure our key results and the outcomes we're seeking in education are very specific, and it ended up being more user-friendly for the nonprofits applying to divide those up into 4 different LOIs. So that is why you will see 4 for education, only select and apply under one of those key drivers. So the rationale that's up on the screen, you see 2 what we feel are extremely compelling points that have helped inform points of information that have helped inform our education strategy. And really, we just want to share these as a representation of all of the research and the national trends that we pay attention to and stay abreast of as we consider our grant making and the limited discretionary dollars that we do grant out. This is the kind of information that we've relied on to identify those key drivers as the biggest levers that we can see toward impacting that goal of One Minneapolis that we have here at the Foundation. Our first key driver in education has to do with early childhood education, and I would really say that on this slide the key word is access, and we mean access in 2 different ways, both just the number of high-quality programs that we have in the state that have available spaces and can be filled by the students that we know are most in need and most at risk of not entering kindergarten ready to learn. And we also mean access in the sense of affordability and efforts to make sure that different funding mechanisms like early childhood education scholarships are available to families, and that there are high-quality programs in their neighborhoods that are convenient and accessible to those families, with a particular emphasis on low-income families and families of color. And related to both of those points of access, we also take a look at those organizations and support efforts around policy and advocacy in the early childhood space. And we also have a policy and advocacy key driver. Typically what we've seen in the past is that organizations that do policy and advocacy specifically around early childhood education do enter our grant round under that early childhood education key driver rather than the policy and advocacy. Our next key driver has to do with the number of what we would call high-performing schools serving low-income students of color. And to flesh that out a little bit more, what we mean by that are schools where students are making at least 1 year of academic growth, if not more, in each of the core content areas. And we're really looking to expand the number of seats in those schools around the city, again, that are accessible and available to those low-income students of color. And we know this is particularly important because when students are entering school and they get behind in their early on, or they aren't entering kindergarten ready, that we know that to close that opportunity gap, that there has to be actually more than 1 year of academic progress typically made. And I'd also want to point out that in this area, we don't have a specific priority to fund schools that belong to traditional districts, schools that are charter schools, or other independent schools that have a different form of governance structure. We're really focused on schools that have the capacity to expand rapidly and serve students well. Our next key driver has to do with the talent and leadership pipeline that we know is critical in order to supply those great schools with the talent that they need to move students forward aggressively and to close opportunity gaps. So what we're really looking at under the talent pipeline key driver is organizations that attract and train high-quality teachers and school leaders, or high-potential teachers and school leaders that, again, can deliver that 1+ years of academic growth in an academic year. And I would also say that we're very careful when evaluating proposals under the P driver to look for diversity, and are very cognizant of the need that we have in the state of Minnesota to increase our pool of educators that are of color and our pool of education leaders that are of color, so that we really have appropriate leadership from the communities that we're trying to serve and that we're most concerned with. And our final key driver in education is policy and advocacy, where we're really looking to empower communities of color and low-income communities to have a strong voice in closing opportunity gaps and voicing their concerns, their experiences, and what they want changed in order to have their children on the path to college and career readiness. In this space, we're looking primarily for organizations that are deeply embedded in their communities, that may be serving a specific neighborhood, that may be serving a specific ethnic population, may be concerned with a specific kind of schools, but that really are taking a cohort approach and embedding themselves deeply with those families, and going beyond just how to advocate for your child inside their classroom or inside their school, but then escalating that over time to how are you able to have bigger impact if it's at a school board level or at a citywide level or at a statewide level. We really want to see these communities taken along and empowered to have their voice expanded and to be more powerful in setting their own course around closing these opportunity gaps for their family and for their children. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Joanne Stately to talk a little bit about our economic vitality area.
Thanks, Max. Again, this is Joanne Stately, and I do want to address the question that's up there from Kelly, asking if they can apply for more than one grant if they have several initiatives. We're going to re-emphasize and emphasize again that you select one priority of funding, whether it's under education, economic vitality, or civic engagement. We do realize that programs may hit on all three of these areas of focus, but you're only eligible to apply for one. So with that, I'll move into our focus on economic vitality. And as Lou said in her introduction, we are very much focusing on how we are able to provide for an inclusive and a competitive workforce in Minneapolis. And again, emphasizing that our focus is on inclusiveness, and particularly as it pertains to our communities of color, and looking at where we have some of the largest gaps when we're talking about economic vitality. Our rationale for this key driver is driven by data, and some of the data points that we've looked at have to do with some of the areas of workforce development, but associating workforce development with what's happening with creating businesses and how that really ties very strongly in creating new jobs, particularly in our communities of color. Over 2/3 of all new jobs are created by small businesses. And in Minneapolis and in this region, we're very fortunate to have a very wide breadth of minority-based businesses that are responsible for revitalizing neighborhoods in Minneapolis and other areas in the region. The other important fact with our minority businesses is that they're also hiring individuals from those communities. So the impact is much greater. It's not just only developing wealth and stabilizing families for individual business owners, but that wealth gets to be distributed to other minority families in the community. And as we look at workforce development in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities area, we're seeing a huge investment of public dollars in the areas of construction. Added on to that, the individual private dollars. And looking at that as one of those critical opportunities for jobs, we do know that those jobs pay a very, very decent wage that it meets one of our goals to move people out of minimum wage, out of poverty, so that they can sustain their families. Within the area of economic vitality, we have 4 key drivers that I'll be going over. And I do want to point out to you on our slide, we talk about key drivers and key results. But we also have a number of impact strategies or things, fundable activities that is not articulated here, but is available if you look on-site at our community guidelines that goes into further detail. So the first area is talking about the increased workforce preparedness and that inclusive workforce that we're interested in funding. And again, particularly we are looking at how are we going to address the gaps that we see in people that are underemployed or unemployed. And as I mentioned previously, this tends to fall along the lines of our racial communities, ethnic communities, looking at our new immigrant communities, and also individuals that are coming out of incarceration. So that is a priority population for us when we're looking at this particular key driver and key results. But we're not just interested in just finding jobs for individuals. As I stressed before, we want people to move beyond poverty. So when we're looking at training opportunities or recruitment and training, we really are focusing on the types of jobs that are going to represent full-time positions with benefits and are going to provide livable wages. Another area of our focus is we want jobs that are going to be permanent and beyond 12 months. If you have the capability to track it 18 months and 24 months, that is something that I really like to see in requests that are coming forward. And our overall goal, of course, is, again, to create this opportunity for individuals so that they'll have jobs to sustain themselves and their families, but we want to match this with what the businesses want. What are the business demanding in the workforce? And we know that as we look at 2020, we're going to have a higher number of individuals that are trained or have degrees to fit what the jobs are like into the future. Our second key driver is building community wealth. So along with having jobs, which is very much part of that, and helping to support minority businesses, there are other things that we can do to think of how we can help and assist our low-income families. And so as part of our strategy, we are willing to look at how do we create some of that community wealth and help stabilize families by, again, providing jobs. Once you have the job, how can we help them manage their dollars better? How can they create bank accounts, savings accounts, and help to establish credit so that they can participate in our economy? And as part of looking at stabilizing our families, we do understand the importance of housing, but when we're talking about housing in this context, it's not the mere providing of affordable housing or low-income housing, but we want to tie that to kind of the workforce so they go hand in hand. It is both stabilizing family and providing jobs as we move forward. Our third key driver is, as I mentioned earlier, the importance of supporting minority business development in our area and supporting those entities, intermediaries that are really out there on the ground working with and identifying businesses within our minority communities and providing the technical assistance and support so that they can be successful. And again, what we want to see is a growth in new minority business, and we want to see an expansion of the existing minority businesses so that they can scale up their operations, hire more individuals from communities of color, and again, contribute to the vitality of our region. And finally, we have an emphasis on our interest in supporting public policies or local policies that are going to impact, again, our overall goal of having an inclusive workforce and how do we build wealth within our communities. And we are looking for policies that are going to address issues that may impact issues that are addressed at the state legislature. Some may be local issues, but the bottom line is that we want to have more individuals of color, people that represent our underrepresented communities, from immigrant communities and from populations that are returning from the correction system, to make sure that they have an opportunity to get jobs and obtain jobs. Ban the box is one of the things that come to my mind as one of those policy issues that is addressing the issues of not asking questions about an individual's status or whether they've been convicted of a particular crime before they've actually have an opportunity to be interviewed so that they're not being screened out. That's kind of an example of some of the work that we've supported in the past. Another one is how we're very happy and pleased to be able to support some of the minimum wage efforts recently here at the state. So we do give an idea of what we're looking for key results, but I encourage anyone, as you're putting together your letter of inquiry, to call me or have a conversation with me, particularly if you're in this area of policy, so that we really kind of have an understanding of what it is that we're seeking and what we want to invest in. Overall, we do know the impact that can happen through policy, and we want to be able to support those efforts that are going to, again, provide better outcomes when we talk about an inclusive workforce
and to help stabilize our families. I would like to now turn it over to Catherine Gray to talk about civic engagement. Oh, I see there's one more question. How does the Minneapolis Foundation define living wage? A living wage, we're looking at the poverty guidelines, and we know kind of what the minimum standards are for an individual or for a family of 4. I'm looking at a scale of $12 to $13 an hour is kind of the low end of what I consider to be a minimum wage. So I hope that answers your question. Now with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine Gray.
Hi everyone. Again, my name is Catherine Gray, and I direct the strategy for civic engagement work. Let me start with a little bit of data. When we look to data in terms of making the case for the work for the choices that we're making around our focus areas. And one of the pieces of very compelling evidence for the civic engagement work comes from a report that was done a few years ago by the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy. Some of you may be familiar with that. Some of you may have even been part of their study, because the study looked at organizations all over the country, and Minnesota was one of the states where they focused their research. There were 15 organizations in Minnesota that were studied over a period of 2 years, and the research showed a return on investment of $138 for every dollar invested. That was in Minnesota. I think overall in the country it was a little bit lower. We're a little ahead of the curve on things, but it was about 115 to 1 for the return on investment. So that's a very impressive statistic. And for those of you who don't do much work with civic engagement and the work that you're doing in our community, might be something for you to take a look at in terms of that report. Again, National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, and the report is called Leveraging Limited Dollars. Let's see. Moving forward in civic engagement, we have 3 key drivers in this particular area, and they focus on voting and they focus on leadership. The first one you'll see is to increase the number of people of color who vote. That's our first key driver. Now, the thing about this particular key driver in 2015, for those of you that are interested in this particular or do work in this arena, is that we will not really have any elections in 2015 unless there's a special election, and that's for in Minneapolis. So. One of the things to think about, if this is an area that if this is a key driver you want to submit your proposal under, make sure that you think about how you want to measure your results for that particular, for 2015, how you want to show progress, how you want to show success. That's certainly true for all of our key drivers and all the work that we're trying to do, but that'll be a bit of it'll be a little different approach in 2015 because of the lack of. Let's move on to the second key driver, which is also focused around voting, but that's more focused around systemic barriers to voting and removing those barriers. The one that comes to mind around that we've done some investing in the last year has been around the felon reenfranchisement work that is being done all over the state, but of course we specifically are more focused on the Minneapolis work. This is really about what we're doing to remove the policies that keep people away from voting. And in Minneapolis, around that particular issue, we estimate there are about over 7,000 people who are walking the streets but actually don't have the right to vote, because they are what's called on paper, and that means they're either on probation or parole, or out on parole. Sorry about that, stumbling over my words there. So anyway, that's one example of that particular key driver. And again, if you have any particular questions on this or any of the drivers, please feel free to call me to talk to me about them. Then we'll go to our last key driver, which is around leadership, advocacy, and organizing capacity, and strengthening those, especially in diverse communities. And as you heard from my colleagues, both in education and in our economic vitality focus areas, I mean, policy advocacy work is important in all three of our areas. My area is a little more focused around positional leadership, and I want you to look at the key results that we're showing on this slide. We're focusing on positional leadership, particularly on that first one. One is around elected and appointed positions. I mean, if civic engagement is really about power and influence and people feeling a sense of that they have influence over the things that are, that they're bumping up against in life, getting folks at all levels of decision making, whether it's from voting all the way into more positional leadership, is going to be part of making that happen. So we're sort of upping the bar, I'd say, in the last year around this particular key driver, and really trying to go for results that direct people, support people, equip people to take more positions of power and influence at every level of decision making in our city. So that might be neighborhood commissions, neighborhood councils, all the way on to elected office and making a choice to run for office. The other piece the other key result in this area is around around public policies being shaped and informed by the people who are most impacted by them. And again, in order to, we have a shortage in people who are affected by policies having some say about policies, and that's what we're really focused on with this key driver. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Luz Maria Frias again to sort of summarize and take us to the next steps.
Thank you, Catherine. Again, this is Luz Maria Frias, and you see the number 1 on your screen, and that's just a crisp, clean message that we want to make sure everyone understands that there's an opportunity to apply for one grant for under one focus area and one key driver. So just so that there's no ambiguity there, we thought if we simply put the number 1, that'd be easiest to capture everyone and the understanding of that. When we're reviewing the LOI, we will look at the focus areas, the key drivers, and the fundable activities that Joanne mentioned earlier. You can look on our website for the grant guidelines, and then you could also look at our strategic framework, which was updated as well. There's quite a bit of metrics in there and data points that might be of interest to you. The other criteria is we continue to have an equity framework, as I referenced earlier. The opportunity to collaborate with others in the community on your issue areas is also very important. Whether or not you have the capacity as a nonprofit organization to lead that, and that of course comes out by the information that you're presenting to us. Who the leadership within your organization is by way of staff, but also the board of directors, that it is inclusive of and reflective of the demographics of our city. Measurable results, our board of directors through the strategic plan and our Growth for Impact plan have really insisted on making sure that we can deliver on and measurable metrics. The impact on Minneapolis residents is key, as we are only funding grant applications that focus on Minneapolis residents. So if you are primarily serving others and not Minneapolis residents, then this will not be a grant round for you to apply. And then making sure that any outstanding overdue reports are submitted before you submit your LOI. If you have any outstanding reports, you're required to submit those before the LOI. If you are uncertain about that, you can contact Andrew Porter, and we can go over that again later in the presentation. The timeline is as follows. The LOI now has been open for a couple of weeks, and it closes on August 8th. If you are chosen to then submit a full application, that will be relayed and conveyed to you on August 26th, and then that will be also the starting point for the submission of the full application, and it will close then September 22nd, and you'll be notified of the decision by December 17th. So quick turnaround. We wanted to just make sure that you know that when you submit comments to us by way of the evaluation that we had last year, but also an evaluation that you'll receive as a result of participating in today's webinar, we do take that into consideration and incorporate your comments. As a result, we've had a longer advance notice here. We posted our information back in May. We have longer periods for submitting the application. And then we've also improved the application functionality by making it more user-friendly. And Andrea Porter is here today this afternoon to go through some of that with you. But do continue to give us that feedback. We do listen, and we do incorporate your suggestions. In terms of the login information both for the LOI and the application, please make sure you begin that process in terms of the login, making sure you have the correct login information and password 1 week before the LOI is due. Now, in the previous slides I mentioned that it's due August 8th. So really your target date is that no later than August 1st, which is this Friday, you should have already ensured and confirmed that you have the correct contact information that will allow you to log in with your username and password. And again, if you've forgotten that information and you need to have that refreshed, then contact Andrea Porter, and her information there is on the screen. With that in mind, I will turn that over to Andrea then. She can redo the area.
Thank you, Luz. This is Andrea again. I'm just going to quickly take you through how to log in and access the application. I cannot stress enough what Luz has said, and please try to log in as soon as you can and not wait until the last minute. It's very important if there's any technical issues that we get those solved immediately and not waiting until it's close to being closed. With that being said, up in the right-hand corner of the screen that you're looking at, you will see where it says to log in. Everybody will begin there. Just click on the login, and you should come to this. On this screen here, if you have your username and password, just enter them there. Click on login, you're good to go. If you do not have your password, if you click on forget password, you'll come to a screen where you can reset your password and get a new one. If you do not know your login at this point, you can call me and I can give that to you so that you can reset your password. Also on the login screen, if you have not been able to successfully just log in, or you did not go to forget your password, there's also a Become a Registered Grantee organization. If you are not yet registered with us, that's where you'll want to go. And that screen looks like this. Please very carefully read these instructions. If you do not follow these instructions to a T, it will not work, and you will have to call me and we will have to straighten that out. That is really all that I have. When you do get successfully logged in, you should come to your grantee dashboard where you'll see your organization's name or any organizations that you may happen to be attached to. You can access the LOI down there in the middle of the screen where it says Civic Engagement, Economic Vitality and Education, or in the left-hand navigation menu as well. So you have plenty of ways to get into the LOI once you successfully get logged in. And here I just want to mention that you can go in and out of the LOI as many times as you need to. You can save and resume later. However, once you submit, you cannot go back in and edit. So make sure that once you submit, you are totally finished with your letter of inquiry. And that is it. If you have any technical questions or any questions about your login or password, just give me a call. And I will turn it back to Luz.
Thank you, Andrea. Again, this is Luz Maria Frias, Vice President over Community Impact here at the Foundation. If you have not submitted questions already, you can still do so in the next 15 minutes via the chat feature, and we will begin to answer those questions. But if you have technical questions about the login, as Andrea was just stating, or experiencing any type of technical difficulties beyond the login information, do contact the corner. If you have questions about the substance that is part of the LOI within the various education areas, that contact information is on your screen. Max Corton for education, Joanne Stately for economic vitality, and Catherine Gray for civic engagement. And when you have any doubts, it is safer to call ahead rather than to kind of wait until the last minute and kind of try to figure it out on your own. A copy of the webinar will be posted on our website by August 4th at our website number, or address, I should say. And with that, maybe we'll turn to some of the questions then that are appearing on the screen here that we've not been able to address just yet. And the first one is regarding youth homelessness and family stability from Sarah Grace, and I'll turn that over to Joanne Stately.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Again, the focus is on workforce development, and so that's what I'm looking for as part of the request of application. As I said, we do understand the importance of providing kind of stability for families and addressing issues of affordable housing and homelessness, but the key there is how does that really tie to the workforce development. The other part of the question is kind of looking at youth. My primary focus in looking at economic vitality is strongly weighted on adults in the workforce. Our thoughts behind that, again, with the limited dollars, is if we are really strong on our education components, kind of the issue of workforce development for youth is not as strong a compelling a case as we're talking about underrepresented communities in the adult workforce. So that is, as I said, tends to be a higher priority and weight when I'm looking at the proposals.
Someone had asked the question whether we would be providing slides from the presentation, and we do plan to do that. They will be posted on our website. I will also send an email out once that is available with the link to the presentation as well as the evaluation form.
Then we have another question regarding the RKMC grant. I'll turn that over to Max.
Yes, requests that are intended to be reviewed by RKMC, although you won't have any option of indicating that when you submit the LOI, we will clearly know that if it's addressing students or education system in St. Paul or statewide rather than just Minneapolis, that would be something for consideration by RKMC because it falls out of the Minneapolis Foundation priorities. So yes, in short, proposal funded by RKMC may address St. Paul specifically and not Minneapolis.
And another question here from Candace, is there an online place to check for reports submitted, meaning whether your report is due or overdue? And we do not yet have that capacity, so you would need to call Andrea Porter or email her with that question, and she could look it up and confirm for you whether or not you have an outstanding report due. We have another question from Paula Macaro regarding what are the minimum and maximum amounts we can apply for. We don't have limits per se that we have set in terms of upper or lower. We have tried over the course of the last two cycles, last year and now this year, is to have an attempt to really focus on grant requests that are right on point with the focus areas and the key drivers that we're investing in, which means fewer organizations receiving funds and as a result then larger grants than historically have been granted. That said, they're about $30,000 to $50,000 are probably average. There are departures from that upwards. Certainly,
depending on the type of grant application accepted.
I would add to that with your request, the other thing that we will be looking at, and this is Joanne speaking, we're going to see what other types of support that you do have for your proposal or your project. I know sometimes there are requests that are asking us to provide 100% of the request, and then that certainly might be a possibility, but to know that as part of that evaluation process is to see what other types of support you have as well.
We have a question from Alexandra for policy and advocacy, and I'll turn that over to Catherine Gray.
Well, I'm thinking this is actually for Max because it seems to be directed to families and parents. I'm thinking for education. So, Max, you want to take a stab at this? And then if it's not for that, yes, for education, Alexandra is telling us. Okay.
Sure. This is Max, and in answer to this question, yes, it can be focused on empowering youth. Proposal under policy and advocacy can be emphasizing youth and engaging them. We have funded in the past, and again, I would just emphasize that it is more of a cohort approach that's moving them kind of youth toward escalating role in having their voice heard and closing opportunity gaps. So I would be looking for that type of escalation throughout the experience that you're offering them.
Any other questions that our listeners might be thinking about? We certainly have a couple more minutes here that we can be available to answer questions. Don't be shy. The questions will be posted online as well afterwards, is my understanding. The question that just came in is whether or not this is for one-year funding, correct? That's correct. So the questions will be posted online with the answers as well. There's only one grant round per year that we have that we're focused on, and we changed that last year. Previous years we had 2 grant rounds. We're going to give it maybe another minute or so to see if there are any other. Here's another question from Mary. Do proposals need to be structured as projects, or can they be support for ongoing programmatic activities? It can be for ongoing activities as long as it closely aligns with our focus areas and key drivers.
One question, this is Catherine, one question people have also asked is about general operating versus project-based, proposals. And we're already receiving proposal requests for both of those, general operating and project proposals. But again, thinking in terms of alignment, always how the proposal is aligning with the key results that you've heard on the webinar.
With that in mind, here's another question. Thank you, Kathleen, for submitting that question. Could a community-based adult education program for immigrants be considered for the focus area of education, or is it only for children?
I would encourage you to give me a call and we can talk more about the specifics of your proposal. I think just looking at that question right now, it seems a little too complicated for me to answer with so few details. So please feel free to reach out via phone or email.
And this is Joanne. When I'm looking at that for adult education, I tie that to some of the economic vitality work as well. So it might be a call to me. I'm not sure. Max will refer you if you call, if it's my area.
And that's a good point that Joanne is alluding to. If when you submit your LOI, there's still some ambiguity or confusion as to what area really it fits best, internally we will give it, assign it to what we call the closest fit into the focus areas to really optimize on the opportunity then for review internally. So the directors work very closely as a team to ensure that the correct placement then works best for that particular LOI. We're going to give it one last minute, 2:50. Well, we've hit, looked like the bewitching hour, so to speak, the bewitching moment. Thank you all for sending your questions to us. They were really helpful. Hopefully others learned from that. They will be posted. This is not an end-all game. If you have additional questions that you think about after this webinar, continue to send them to us, and we will get them answered. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for all that you do in our community to make our community stronger. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.